China just built a hybrid engine that's beating every electric vehicle on the road. Guinness World Records just verified it shattered a record that nobody in the automotive industry thought was actually possible. What does this mean for the next generation of cars you can actually buy? Electric vehicles were supposed to fix everything because they promised no emissions and no gas stations, and cars that would finally break us free from the oil industry. But the moment people actually started living with them, the problems showed up faster than anyone expected, and the cracks started showing in ways that the commercials never mention. Start with charging, because every advertisement says fast charging. And what that actually means in real life is sitting at a station for 20 to 40 minutes minimum to get your battery up to 80%. And that's if you're lucky and the charger isn't broken or occupied by someone else who's already been waiting. Try doing that on a road trip with 2 kids and a dog in the back seat where everyone's tired and hungry and you're burning daylight, and you realize that sitting at a charging station for 40 minutes isn't refueling, but a hostage situation that gets worse every single trip. Then there's the cold weather problem, where electric vehicle batteries lose 30 to 40% of their range the moment temperatures drop below freezing, which means that 300-mile range you paid $60,000 for in a Michigan winter becomes 180 miles. And the heater draws so much power that you're watching your miles disappear in real time while you're desperately trying to find a charger before you get stranded. In climates where winter actually matters, that EV becomes a different vehicle entirely, with a different range and different limitations and different problems than what you thought you were buying. And then there's the battery replacement problem that nobody puts in the brochure, because it kills the fantasy of owning an electric vehicle and turns ownership into a financial trap that catches people by surprise. When that battery finally degrades to the point where it's no longer acceptable and you're losing range faster than your car is aging, replacement costs anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 or more, depending on the vehicle and the battery size, which means you're replacing the entire pack and the BMS system, and reconnecting all the thermal management and waiting weeks for the service. That's a used car, just for one component of the vehicle. And it happens right when you thought you were done paying for the car, because the loan is getting close to being paid off and you're supposed to be enjoying the benefits of ownership instead of writing another massive check to replace the degraded battery. Most EV buyers don't think about this when they're signing the loan paperwork, because the salesmen don't mention it and the brochures show happy people driving with no problems. But year 5 or year 6 hits, and suddenly the battery that was promised to last the life of the vehicle is failing, and the replacement is financially catastrophic. There's also the environmental question that's supposed to be the whole point, because electric vehicles need lithium and cobalt and nickel to make their batteries, and getting those metals out of the ground is genuinely brutal, with massive open-pit mines and toxic runoff and mining operations that scar the landscape for generations. Cobalt mostly comes from the Congo, where child labor is a documented problem, which means your clean car that's supposed to save the planet has a mining footprint that most people would rather not think about too carefully. And on top of all that, the grid literally cannot handle it if every American buys an electric vehicle tomorrow, because the Department of Energy has been raising flags about this for years, where the infrastructure simply isn't there to support that volume of charging demand simultaneously across the country. The grid would need to be completely rebuilt with new substations and new transmission lines and new distribution networks, which means the entire electrical infrastructure of the country would need to be reinvented before mass EV adoption becomes actually viable for everyone, instead of just wealthy people with dedicated chargers at home. So while America was busy arguing about electric vehicle mandates and whether Tesla was worth the valuation and whether the future was battery electric or something else nobody's figured out yet, and while politicians were fighting about tariffs on Chinese EVs and whether to give subsidies to American battery manufacturers, China was quietly building something completely different that nobody in Washington was paying attention to. In April 2026 at the Beijing Auto Show, Geely walked on stage and announced what they're calling the IHEV Intelligent Hybrid System. And at the center of it is a brand new engine called the BHE15, a 1.5-litre 4-cylinder that doesn't look like much until you see the numbers they're claiming. The first number they put on screen broke the room because it was 48.41% thermal efficiency, which is the highest thermal efficiency ever achieved by a mass-produced car engine according to Guinness World Records. And to put that in perspective, The average car engine in your driveway converts about 30 to 35% of the fuel's energy into actual motion, while the rest gets dumped as waste heat out the tailpipe. Toyota's most efficient hybrid engine, the one the entire industry has been bowing to for 30 years, sits at 41% thermal efficiency, which was supposed to be the ceiling of what was physically possible in a production vehicle without building a Formula One engine that costs millions of dollars. Geely just rolled out 48.41% in a sedan that cost $9,000, and Guinness came in and tested it and made it official, which means China is now within touching distance of Formula One engine efficiency in a car that regular people can actually afford to buy. But that's just the engine by itself, and the real proof comes when you bolt it into a real car and take it out on the road, because Geely took the same BHE-15 engine and paired it with a 308 horsepower electric motor and their AI cloud power system, and ran it around a closed loop in Hainan, and the M Grand sedan averaged 2.22 liters per 100 kilometers, which in American terms is 106 miles per gallon. Guinness verified that too, which means this isn't a theoretical number or a lab result, but an actual car driving around a closed course and proving it can achieve those numbers in the real world. And here's where it gets ridiculous, because in 2024, Toyota drove a Prius from Los Angeles to New York to brag about real-world efficiency, and they averaged over 93 miles per gallon, which is impressive until you realize that Geely just beat them by over 12% in a sedan that also has more power and more torque and more performance than a Prius. But Geely isn't just some random startup, because behind this engine is a farmer's son named Li Shufu, who started with $3,000 and refrigerator parts in 1986, pivoted to motorcycles in 1994, and decided to build cars in 1997 when people called him delusional. In 2001, he became the first private Chinese company ever licensed to build automobiles. And in 2010, he walked out of Ford headquarters with Volvo and $1.8 billion in cash after Ford kept ignoring him. Then he bought 9.7% of Daimler, making him the largest shareholder of Mercedes-Benz. Today, he owns Volvo and Polestar and Lotus and Lynk and Co. and Zeekr. And that hustle and that persistence and that engineering obsession is exactly why the engine they just dropped is about to break the entire EV industry. Because it's not just an engine, but proof that while Western companies were arguing about the future, a farmer's son was quietly building it. But Geely isn't doing this alone, because here's the part that Detroit and Tokyo and Seoul haven't woken up to yet, which is that China didn't just win one race, but is winning all of them simultaneously across the entire industry. And there's nobody from the West even close to catching up. BYD, the same company that already passed Tesla in electric vehicle sales, launched their 5th generation DM hybrid in 2024 with a 46.06% thermal efficiency and a combined range of 2,100 kilometers, which is over 1,300 miles on one tank and one charge, roughly the distance from Miami to Boston, without stopping for fuel or electricity or anything else. That means you could drive from one coast to the other without ever stopping to refuel or charge, which completely changes the equation for family road trips and long-distance travel, where EVs have always been limited by range anxiety. Every major Chinese automaker has rolled out 2,000-plus kilometer hybrids in the last 18 months, including Chang'an, which built the UNI KDMY hybrid, and SAIC, which is shipping their eDMI technology, and GAC, which has the Ion DMI line, and Chery, which is scaling the Tiggo DMI platform, and Great Wall, which is dominating with their DMI hybrid ecosystem across multiple brands. This means the entire Chinese industry is moving in the same direction with unified strategy, while the Japanese and American and European manufacturers are still arguing about whether the future should be battery electric or hybrid or hydrogen or plug-in hybrid or something else nobody's figured out yet. Aeolus, a brand most Americans have never heard of, hit 45% thermal efficiency on their L7 sedan, which is higher than anything Toyota or Honda has ever produced in their entire history of building cars, and proves that even the lesser-known Chinese brands are now outperforming the historical leaders. Meanwhile, in Japan, Toyota and Honda's best engines are still parked at 41%, which was supposed to be the future ceiling, and now looks like the past compared to what China is shipping in volume production right now. In Detroit, Ford and General Motors and Stellantis are mostly selling engines that have not crossed 35% thermal efficiency, which is a generational gap that's only getting wider as Chinese manufacturers keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible, while Western manufacturers are still trying to figure out how to respond to a threat they didn't see coming. And it's not just sedans, because the same IHEV technology is rolling out into Geely's larger SUVs, the Preface and the Monjaro and the Boyue L and the Xingyue L, which means this isn't a one-off achievement, but a platform that's scaling across an entire vehicle lineup. Eventually, it's going into commercial vehicles and trucks, where efficiency matters even more because fuel costs are a bigger part of the operating budget. But here's the part that reveals why this matters more than just one Chinese company winning one race. Because Geely owns Volvo, and Geely owns Polestar, and Geely owns Lotus, and Geely has a joint venture with Mercedes that builds smart cars, which means this technology isn't staying in China, but is about to filter into European cars and cars sold in America and every market on Earth. Geely licenses their powertrains to Western automakers through their Horse Powertrain joint venture, which means manufacturers that have been struggling to compete with Chinese efficiency are about to have access to this technology and the choice of whether to use it or keep building the same engines they've been building for the last 20 years. The implications are massive, because if a Volvo or a Polestar or a Mercedes suddenly has access to a 48% efficient engine, that changes the equation for every other luxury brand in the world who's been betting their future on electric vehicles, while China quietly solved the efficiency problem with combustion engines that are good enough to make EVs look like the wrong choice. When you pull all of this together, what China just proved is that while America was arguing about electric vehicle mandates and politicians were fighting about charging stations, and the entire Western automotive industry was placing billion-dollar bets on battery electric becoming the only future, a farmer's son in Zhejiang was quietly building engines that make those bets look like strategic mistakes. The problem with electric vehicles was never the concept, but the execution, where the charging time and the cold weather performance and the battery replacement costs and the grid limitations all added up to a vehicle that works great as a second car in a mild climate, but doesn't work as a primary vehicle for most people in most situations. Hybrids solve all of those problems while keeping the benefits of electric motors for low-speed efficiency and smooth acceleration and quiet operation in the city. A hybrid that gets 106 miles per gallon doesn't need charging infrastructure because it's still a gas car at heart, and you can fuel it at any station in 5 minutes like you've been doing for 100 years. A hybrid that keeps 90% of its efficiency in cold weather doesn't punish drivers in winter climates where EVs lose half their range and become frustrating. A hybrid that's designed to last 300,000 miles doesn't require a $15,000 battery replacement at year 6 that kills the financial case for ownership. And a hybrid that's already in production right now in a $9,000 sedan means this isn't something coming in 2030 or 2035, but something that's already happening and already proving itself in real-world driving conditions, while Western manufacturers are still planning how to respond. For EV owners who bought in the last 2 years thinking they were buying the future, this is the moment they realize their choice might have been premature, because a Chinese manufacturer just proved that hybrids are the better answer. And that realization is going to hit different when they're sitting at a charging station in winter watching their range evaporate. For EV shoppers who are planning to buy in 2026 or 2027, this changes everything, because suddenly there's a real alternative that's cheaper and better in every practical way, which means the discount pressure on EVs is about to get brutal as manufacturers try to move inventory that nobody's going to want anymore. For Western automakers that bet billions on electric vehicles as the only future, this is the moment they have to admit that they got the strategy wrong, and that while they were focused on one technology, China solved the actual problem that customers care about, which is getting from point A to point B without hassle and without breaking the bank. The future of driving isn't being decided in Detroit anymore, and it already got decided in Hangzhou when a company called Geely announced an engine that proved the electric vehicle revolution was based on solving the wrong problem. While Washington argued about mandates and Detroit begged for tariffs, and Tesla built charging networks, China quietly built the most efficient production engine in human history and put it in cars that people actually want to drive. What do you think? Drop your answer in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching.